So, you've got a crummy old cast iron skillet. Maybe you bought it at the antique store, inherited from a relative, something like that, and you want to get it cleaned up and looking like beautiful new iron ready to cook. There's an awful lot of different ways to do that. We're going to have a little conversation about how to do that, different methods available, and in this video I will demonstrate two of those methods. So stay tuned and let's get to it. Alright, so first things first, this is going to be a two-part video because otherwise it's going to be really long and you guys are probably not going to like it. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to clean cast iron cookware. Three categories: abrasive, least popular, chemical, and oven clean. So the abrasive approach, again, least popular, but in my opinion it's probably the fastest. Not probably, it is the fastest. You can go from zero to a clean cast iron skillet in about 2 hours if you got the right equipment, and right equipment readily available, not terribly expensive. We're talking a 4.5 inch angle grinder and some paint stripping pads. Now, plus side, speed. Gets the job done real quick and it's effective. Negative side of using abrasive method, there's a few. One, airborne particulate matter. You're going to be breathing stuff in, so you have to wear a respiratory face mask, N95 or better. Eye protection, totally not optional. Hearing protection, again, if you're using an angle grinder, totally not optional. Those things are extraordinarily loud. So you got to weigh the pluses and minuses here. The finished product of your skillet, after treating it with an abrasive angle grinder, there's the potential for burnishing of the metal. Burnishing meaning it kind of smooths things over. It takes those little peaks and bumps and whatnot and levels them out, and that can actually be counterproductive for seasoning. You need to have some surface roughness, very minor surface roughness, but you have to have some. So if your skillet is shiny, that's no good. So another obvious negative reason why this approach is the least popular is because if you're dealing with a very early cast iron skillet, something from the 1800s, really thin wall, not a good idea to use abrasives on it because you will damage the skillet. You are taking some metal off. If you do it right, you are taking very little metal off on the level of grams, where a skillet is a few pounds. A pound is 454 grams. So you don't need to take much metal off. You're primarily removing seasoning and creosote, but still, you are removing some metal from this, and if it is a very early skillet, there's going to be an inherent collector value to that, and using abrasives may damage the collector value if that's your objective. It is not my objective. I buy things to use them, not to sell them to collectors. Skillets were made to be used, I use them. I got ripped up a lot for doing the angle grinder approach to a Lodge 1950s era cast iron skillet. There was no collector value to that skillet. I think I paid $12 for it at an antique store. So, next subject. Different style of abrasive cleaning is media blasting, and I'm not talking about blasting CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and all that good stuff. We're talking about using compressed air and fine particulate media, which can be corncob media, walnut shell media, busted up really tiny fragments of walnut shell, glass bead, or sand. And these methods all will work pretty well for cleaning the seasoning off of a skillet. However, if you have a really heavy creosote layer, it's not really going to work that well. The creosote will kind of bounce, ricochet the stuff off of it. It's more plasticky, rubbery, like tar, than it is brittle. Media blasting works against brittle surfaces. Strips paint off beautifully. It will strip seasoning off totally fine. So, negative side of that, You really need to have a media blasting cabinet if you're going to be carrying this out. And that cabinet takes up some space, a few feet long, a foot or two deep. You know, it's completely sealed off, so the dust won't be an issue. You won't be breathing anything in, and there's really not it's not a really noisy procedure. I do not recommend open media blasting, which is just out in the open, because you're going to get whatever that media is, corn cob media, nutshell media, sand, glass bead. You're going to get that in places on your body where you really don't want that to get, because it's going to get everywhere. I've done that. So that's the media blasting. That basically covers abrasives. If you want to talk about sandpaper, you're spending years, like pretty much using sandpaper to clean a cast iron skillet. I don't recommend it. So next subject is chemical approach. Chemical approach. I am a chemist. That's my career. I have a master's degree. I've worked with all kinds of different chemicals, ranging from extremely lethal stuff, potassium cyanide, down to obviously water is totally inert. So I'm pretty comfortable working with chemicals. A good example of that, the example that's going to be in the context here, is strong hydroxides like lithium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, etc. These alkali hydroxides are incredibly dangerous, particularly to your skin. They will literally take the fatty acids in your skin and turn it into soap in a chemical process called saponification, which is where we get our modern day soap. Thank you to the ancient Egyptians who discovered that. It is an incredibly effective method for that very reason. The creosote on the outside of your skillet, if it was from the wood burning stove era, and the seasoning on the inside of your skillet, those are all polymerized fatty acids. So the fatty acids, you think of an acid, and the lye, the sodium hydroxide or lithium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, that's a base. Even if you haven't gone to school for chemistry, you've probably heard at some point in time acid and base chemistry. They combine together and they neutralize each other and they form other species. So in this particular case, you're forming something like, I don't know what fatty acids exist. There's a smorgasbord of fatty acids within creosote and cooking, seasoning. But you're forming whatever that is, if it's like Lawrence sulfate or dodecyl sulfate or something like that, then you're forming sodium dodecyl sulfate. If you go to your shampoo bottle or your body wash or your Dawn dish soap, you will see something like sodium dodecyl sulfate or sodium Lawrence sulfate. That's exactly what that is. That Lawrence sulfate represents a fatty acid, and it was saponified with a strong base. So that's the underlying chemical understanding there. So the method is incredibly effective, but it takes a long time. You're talking on the order of days or even weeks, depending on how funky your skillet is. I demonstrated this method. You will see it in part 2 of this video, and that particular skillet had a pretty generous layer of creosote on the outside and pretty thick seasoning on the inside, and that took 5 days. Angle grinder, a couple hours. Lye bath, chemistry method, 5 days. Totally up to you to weigh those options. Again, chemical safety, cannot emphasize this enough. Safety glasses, not optional. Vinyl gloves. I wore latex gloves because I'm very comfortable with what I'm doing. I had 0 issues with getting get that lye solution on my skin, so that worked for me. But if you don't have a lot of experience in chemistry, I recommend thick, long vinyl gloves that go up to here, just to be safe. You do not want to dance with hydroxides. I did this method with a very small scale. Commonly, when people talk about using sodium hydroxide or lye to clean their cast iron cookware, they're doing it in a lye bath, meaning a garbage can full of sodium hydroxide or a 25-gallon plastic storage tote full of lye solution, and you can, in vessels like that, you can fit a bunch of cast iron cookware. You can put 20 pieces in there and leave them in there for a couple weeks, and whenever you get to it, take them out, rinse the heck out of them, wipe them down with oil, and you've got a pristine article of cast iron cookware. If you are doing this on a business scale where you are buying these things cheap, all crummied up and funky and whatnot, and then you're selling them clean, that's a great option. If you've got children in your household or pets, you need to pay attention to the risks. If children are unattended and they get into this concentrated lye solution, you have a severe chemical burn, life-changing situation on your kids, on your hands, basically. So do not take that lightly. Furthermore, pets, if your cat somehow gets into your lye bath, well, let's just not do that. So inherent risk there to personal safety and to, you know, your children, your family, your pets. However, there is really no risk to the article of cookware that you are cleaning, because the hydroxides will not attack the iron. What I did for the lye bath solution is I did an entire skillet with just this 1 quart bottle. This is Heron Grease, Instant Power, made by the Scotch Corporation, and this contains nothing but potassium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide. Very concentrated, very dangerous. But I cleaned the whole skillet in a 5-gallon bucket using that and a garbage bag and water, and you will see how that's done in part 2 of this video. That's the chemical approach. The other one that some people have mentioned is using Easy Off oven cleaner. Easy Off is not purely hydroxides like sodium hydroxide and potassium hydroxide. It has aerosolized propellants in it like butane. It's got fragrances in it because apparently they want it to smell good, like lemon scent, I have no idea, and other organics in there. And I don't want personally to spray that onto a surface that I'm going to be eating off of. I think oven cleaner is intended to clean ovens, and you don't put food directly on your oven. So I don't recommend using Easy Off. Lastly, the oven clean cycle. This is a very touchy subject. Touchy in that one of my viewers actually broke a family heirloom cast iron skillet because they popped it into their oven. Turns out the oven cleaning cycle, and obviously the piece of cookware either heated up and or cooled down too quickly and it warped and cracked. Cast iron does not mind heat. Make no mistake about it. If you've got a 50-year-old cast iron skillet, that skillet, as far as the iron within it is concerned, just yesterday it was being poured as a molten solution of iron. So if iron is heated all the way up to just below the melting point of cast iron, it's totally fine, as long as that is done slowly, and as long as it is allowed to cool down slowly. Time is everything when it comes to heating up cast iron. It does not mind heat. It just has to be heated up and cooled down slowly. Rapid changes in temperature will crack it, or warp it at the very least. I used the oven clean cycle because I had several articles of cast iron cookware that I wanted to clean at the same time. I had 5 in particular. I put all 5 in the oven. The oven is only capable of heating at a fixed maximum rate, some number of joules of energy per unit time. That's just what the burner in my oven is capable of. So if I only have 1 article of cast iron in my oven, it's going to heat up more quickly than if I have several articles of cast iron in my oven, because there's more thermal mass within the oven. And the same thing applies to the cooling down. All that thermal mass, all those cast iron pieces are at my oven heats up to 850 degrees Fahrenheit for the cleaning cycle, and then it cools down over some period of time. You've got a whole bunch of cast iron in there at 850 degrees, and it is retaining that heat and slowly radiating it off through the insulation of the oven, so the cooling down is very, very slow. If you only had one piece of cast iron in there, it's going to cool down more quickly than if you have a bunch. So don't use the oven clean cycle if you only have one article of cookware that you're going to clean. Just don't do it, it's too risky. So, the last two methods that we described here, the chemical and the oven clean approach, very, very little work. You soak it in lye solution for a week, take it out, clean it, scrub it with steel wool and soap, dish soap, rinse it thoroughly with water, and then wipe it down with oil. You're done. Oven clean cycle, exact same thing. You run it through the oven clean cycle, you take it out, take it to your sink, after it's completely cooled down to room temperature, and then scrub it with steel wool and dish soap, rinse it off thoroughly, wipe it with oil, you're done. Safety factor of the oven clean cycle, don't ever leave your oven on when you are not around. Do not turn your oven on for the oven clean cycle and put your cast iron cookware in there and then go to bed. Do not do that. I will never, ever, ever advocate to leave your oven on when it is unattended. So there's a major downside to the oven clean method, and that is smoke. Smoke, like you wouldn't believe. You have to have a substantial range hood in order to handle the amount of smoke that's going to be coming out. Because again, with the oven clean method, you're using multiple pieces of cast iron. Don't do it for one. Unfortunately, I learned this the hard way. My range hood is woefully insufficient for that. I stunk up my house for a solid week. It was terrible. But at the end of the day, I had 5 gorgeous, gorgeous pieces of cast iron cookware. So at the end of the day, my house doesn't stink anymore. Been a couple months, and we're good. Anyhow, I'm going to quit rambling on, and let's get into it. I'm going to demonstrate the oven clean cycle. It's going to be kind of an abridged version. I'm going to show you the before images of what I'm putting into the oven, and then the after. Really enjoy if you hit that like button. I really hope you learned something from this. Figured I'd try and condense as much information as possible, but I know it's going to be a long video. And then later on I will post the second part of this video, which will be the lye bath solution approach. So stay tuned, enjoy the video, please hit that like button and subscribe, really appreciate it, and enjoy. What do we have here, ladies and gentlemen? It is another cast iron skillet. We've got here a Wagner number 8. It looks like the previous owner really loved going to town on their skillet with a knife, because there are deep scratches all over the place. Looking at the bottom of it, this is like almost a total flashback to restoration of the number 7 Lodge. So what we see here is real heavy creosote buildup, like extremely thick. Now, this is not the only skillet that we will be throwing in the oven, because that would kind of be inefficient to do an oven clean cycle for one skillet. So hang on a second. We've got this gem. Check this out. This is a present from a dear cousin of mine, and I have never seen anything like it. It is a Wagner. It's frankly in darn good shape, and this is called a 5-star skillet set. The number down here is 1403. It is a 2-piece system. You've got a deep skillet, and then you've got a short, like flapjack, shallow skillet. So it would be frankly perfect for omelets. It is awesome, and they come together. You can do like I'm assuming that this would be great for baking a pie. I've never tried baking pie in cast iron skillet, but I feel like this would be a freaking awesome way of getting nice uniform heat all the way around it. We're going to throw this in the oven too on the oven clean cycle. There is not a substantial existing seasoning layer on here, but there is some. There's some funky business going on the lid there. There's some rust on there, but otherwise there's really nothing on the top. That's pretty much bare iron that's been passivated by rust. So this won't really involve much, but it's a really cool piece. And we're also going to throw in a skillet that is not mine. This was given to me to clean up by a friend of mine. It's a Griswold number 3. So this is going in the oven. I already, with her on hand, cleaned up some of the seasoning out of here and smoothed the edges from the original sharp casting and whatnot. Cleaned things up with an angle grinder. She was super happy with it, but obviously we're going to clean it all the way down to bare iron, and it was, because it's a small skillet, it was very hard to get in there. So we're going to do the oven clean cycle on this. And last but not least, this is another Wagner. It's number 3. This was my grandmother's skillet. Frankly, the internal seasoning is, honestly, it's in really good shape, but I want to get it cleaned, start over from scratch. The bottom is really loaded with creosote. So you guys might give me flack for cleaning off my grandmother's cast iron skillet, but one way or another, she still used it, she still cooked on it. It's still a family heirloom. It's just going to be a much cleaner family heirloom. So that's it. We're going to go ahead and load these in the oven and get the cleaning cycle going. And here's the big reveal. Ta-da! Well, first and foremost, let's look at we'll do the big one last. So here's the number 3 Griswold that belonged to my friend, or I should say belongs to my friend. It's still hers. So, like I said, there was some seasoning that was built up in the corners that I couldn't get to with an angle grinder. All gone. We pretty much had the outside of the skillet cleaned off, but everything that was on there, you see there was a little bit of ashing going on by that little hook there, but gone. So that just needs to be cleaned up, oiled, and re-seasoned. Next is my number 3, which was my grandmother's. So, like I said, this was a Wagner, but it was virtually impossible to read that it was a Wagner. I was able to faintly make out the W, but couldn't make out any more. And now I can clearly see. Piece of cake. Worked an absolute treat. Yeah. I even see a number down here, which I totally did not see before. That's 105.3S. So that came out perfectly. Next we have the skillet set here. This again is a Wagner, and yeah, it didn't have much. Like I said, this wasn't terribly heavy in seasoning. I'm not sure if it was just not used an awful lot, or if somebody already tried cleaning it previously, but it's clean as a whistle now. We just need to get all that rust and ash off of there. Yeah, and then the lid for it. This has ash on here, but that's from my grandmother's Wagner number 3 that was sitting above it. This is pretty similar to the other counterpart, where it really didn't have an awful lot of seasoning. It's more so I was just doing some due diligence to make sure if there was seasoning on there. It's not anymore. And so all we need to do is clean the rust off of this in the bottom part. And the moment we've all been waiting for is the newest addition to my cast iron family. Look at that. All gone.
That's pretty remarkable. I don't even want to flip it over because there's so much ash there, but we'll bring you up the top side here and we'll clean some of these off. So I'm going to call this a fantastic success. We've got a whole bunch of cast iron skillets that we cleaned up using the oven bake method, the oven clean method I should say. Set your oven on the cleaning cycle with a bunch of cast iron skillets in there. And the result is just gorgeous. Is there anything more beautiful than clean cast iron for me? If I could have my house painted in cast iron gray, I think I probably would do it. It is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. So the inside of this one I sanded. The other skillets that I cleaned up in the oven bake method, as seen on this video, I did not sand them. So this is as basically as it came out of the oven. I cleaned it up in the sink with soap and steel wool and hot water, and then wiped it down with oil, and this is drop dead gorgeous. So beautiful. Alright, so there you have it. Not an awful lot of detail in the action part of the video, that is the oven clean cycle part of the video, but then again, you're taking dirty cast iron, sticking it in the oven, and taking it out. The only bit that you do after that is simply using steel wool, really fine quadruple zero steel wool, and dish soap. Scrub it very minimally under tap water, and then dry it off quickly and wipe it down with oil. I just used canola oil. I did try initially scrubbing them with Scotch-Brite pad and soap, and that didn't work. There was still a considerable amount of what looked like rust slash ash or what have you on the surface, even after I wiped it down with oil. But the steel wool left a pristine, beautiful gray finish, which is what you want. So that's my recommendation there. Again, the most important takeaway with the oven clean cycle is that you should not use that method if you've only got one piece of cast iron cookware to put in the oven, because that would be too much thermal shock. Without that mass, that extra mass of having other cast iron cookware in there, the temperature will increase too quickly and decrease too quickly, and you're risking cracking it. So please use that as a word of caution, and hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please again hit that like button and subscribe, really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next video, which will be part 2 of this, where we use the live bath method, and I'll show you guys how to take care of cleaning a cast iron skillet with just 1 quart, instead of filling up a 5-gallon bucket with a very, very hazardous chemical solution. So again, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.